Hello Bio 2, this is Mr. B, and we're here to wrap up our chapter on classification. And our last topic is going to kind of focus on where we're at today with classification and how it has evolved over time. So the title of this section was Kingdoms and Domains. So starting off here, our systems of classifications adapt to new discoveries. Linnaeus classified organisms into two kingdoms, animals and plants. I believe we discussed that on one of our first workbook activities that Linnaeus only described plants and animals, and so that was early on, and the only known differences at that time among living things were the fundamental traits that separated animals from plants. So when we first started with our system of classification and identification, we really only had basic characteristics to go off of, looking at what is an animal and what is a plant. However, as time went on, scientists realized there were enough differences in organisms to make 5 different kingdoms. So these 5 kingdoms are known as Monera, Protista, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. So that's, again, remember we talked about how everything is Latin, and when we talk about scientific names, so that's why they sound like this. We're going to talk about each one of these. However, even since this 5 kingdoms, this is just a recent discovery, probably within our lifetime maybe, that this even happened. Biologists recognized that Monera was composed of 2 distinct groups, Eubacteria and Archaeobacteria. So now we have 6 kingdoms. So what are the 6 kingdoms now? So we saw 4 of them earlier, so now here are the 2 new ones, Eubacteria, Archaeobacteria, Protista, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. So that is our 6 kingdoms as they stand today. And here is kind of a breakdown of like the time frame of when these changes occurred. As you can see, in the 1700s, we only had Plantae and Animalia. In the late 1800s, we added Protista in there, and Plantae and Animalia. And then in the 1950s, Monera, Protista, and fungi. As you can see, fungi used to be grouped with plants there, and you can see in the 1950s they finally got their own. And then in the 1990s, we are at where we're at today: Eubacteria, Archaeobacteria, Protista, fungi, Plantae, and animal. So those are the kingdoms where we're at today. And up until this point, we've been saying that the kingdom is our largest group of classification. However, as time goes on, things even change even more. So now we have something that's called the 3-domain system, and looking at molecular analysis have given rise to a new taxonomic category that is now recognized by many scientists. And this new category is the domain, and it's a more inclusive category than any other. And like I said, it is larger than a kingdom. So add this on maybe to your list of 7 levels that we had before. We now have 8, with domain being the highest. So what is the 3-domain system of classification? We're going to look at the 3 domains that we have. So the first one is known as eukarya. Again, eukaryotic cells kind of is the ones that are associated with these: the protists, the fungi, the plants, and the animals. So eukarya sounds like eukaryotic. The next one is bacteria, and this only corresponds with the kingdom Eubacteria. And then again, those names are pretty almost identical there, just a little bit difference. Then we have Archaea, which corresponds to the kingdom Archaeobacteria. So these domains aren't that hard to remember because their names are really associated with what they really are. So looking at these in a little bit more detail. Oh, okay, never mind. So this is just saying again how everything is rapidly changing, and probably as new information is gained about organisms in the domains bacteria and archaea, they may be subdivided into additional kingdoms. So this chart that we saw right here, underneath the 1990s right here, might have 2000s, and might have splits in Eubacteria and splits in Archaeobacteria. So that's, again, a lot of technological changes are going on to make that happen. So okay, so here we go. So some specifics about the domain bacteria. This group is unicellular prokaryotes. They have thick, rigid cell walls, and their cell walls contain peptidoglycan. So those are just some of the characteristics that were going to be associated with bacteria. And again, corresponds to the kingdom Eubacteria. And here is again what I just said there. And it kind of has the domain kingdom, cell type, cell structures, number of cells, mode of nutrition, and examples. And I'll give you this chart on your note sheet, so don't worry about that. And then Archaea, again, these are unicellular prokaryotes. However, these ones are going to be ones that only live in extreme environments. So there's ones that can live in extremely high temperatures, ones that live in really high salt contents, ones that live in like areas where there's only pretty much methane present, ones that live in those geysers that you see out in Yellowstone Park. So they are quite a different group. They're one of the oldest groups. And then their cell walls lack peptidoglycan, and their cell membranes contain unusual lipids not found in any organism. So that's why we had to make this separation in Monera, because they're so different. And then again, that's just that same chart, and then you can look at that again in your notes when we get that. And domain eukarya, the domain eukarya consists of organisms that have a nucleus, the eukaryotic cells, and those consist of the protists, the fungi, the plants, and the animals. And again, here's another chart. Again, some of this should be reviewed, but if not, then you will have this in your notes to look at, and we will go over it more in depth in class, just about how each specific group is kind of laid out there. So then Protista, again, they're composed of eukaryotics. They're eukaryotic and they're single cells. They're kind of the catch-all group for the eukaryotes. They're the ones that can't be classified as animals, plants, or fungi. And they can be unicellular or multicellular, photosynthetic or heterotrophic, and they can share characteristics with plants, animals, or fungus. So they're kind of, again, the catch-all group. Then fungi, we just did our whole unit about fungi. They're heterotrophs. Most feed on decaying matter. They're decomposers. And then they can either be multicellular, the mushrooms, or unicellular yeast. And again, we'll have a list in your notes more specific, but you guys are all experts about this by now. Next one, plants. This is going to be the next group we talk about. They're members of the kingdom Plantae, and they're multicellular photosynthetic autotrophs, which, again, if we don't know those words now, you will. They're non-motile, which means they cannot move. Their cell walls contain cellulose, and the kingdom includes cone-bearing and flowering plants, as well as mosses and ferns. So again, we're going to talk about these more in depth here in a little bit. So then, Animalia, this will be what we finish up the year with. Members of the kingdom Animalia are multicellular and heterotrophic. The cells of animals do not have cell walls, so we are animals, so we do not have cell walls. Most animals can move about. There's some, like corals, a coral that lives in the ocean that makes up the reefs. Those are animals, but they really cannot move around. Then there's great diversity with the animal kingdom, and many species exist in nearly every part of the planet. So there's animals all over the place, and again, we're going to talk about all of those later on. This is just a quick introduction, and that is all. If you have any questions, let me know.